Some people say that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Others say that integrity doesn't mean being perfect, it means being authentic. Still, others will say that integrity is choosing our thoughts and actions based on values rather than personal gain. Okay, let me share a little secret with you. I can put 100 people into a room and ask for their definition of integrity, and I'll get 100 different answers. In today's video, we'll talk about integrity, why it's so different for each individual, and how integrity is taking the right path for you and the wisdom to know what that right path is. This podcast is all about helping you with your spiritual growth so you can overcome obstacles and manifest your destiny to crystallize all things good. Basically, to have success on life's journey. It's all about getting unstuck by unlocking your hidden power. So let's get started. Hi there and welcome. My name is Remy, like Do Re Mi. I'm a best-selling author and creator of the Get Unstuck Revolution. I help extraordinary women just like you dissolve the obstacles in your path so you can bring success to you. Now let's get started with today's video. Okay, let me jump off the screen here and switch to my laptop. Today, we're talking about integrity, but it's not always a black and white issue. This may be an uncomfortable topic, but stay with me, and I think you'll get more comfortable with these concepts that I have for you today. Because if you ever find yourself thinking, I'm not sure what to do, I have these rules and boundaries and expectations, but do I need to redefine what integrity means for me? I'll help you navigate the right path using your old or your new and updated version of integrity so that you can easily find your way to a successful outcome. If you'd like to see success in full abundance along life's journey, and if you're wanting to tap into a greater knowingness and align with the higher consciousness of your infinite self instead of the lower ego thinking and negative thoughts that push success away, then this is for you. It's time to be unabashedly, unapologetically, happily untethered to ego thinking. It's time to align with the higher energies of our soul's path instead. This episode is for you if you wonder how to know what the right path is for you. What is integrity? It isn't as black and white as you may think. And what to do when part of you wants this and part of you wants that. Yes, these episodes are about how to find your hidden power when you want to transform challenges into successes. I like to call it the audacity of alchemy. Because when we're feeling stuck, it's never the situation that has us stuck, it's our energy about it that's become stuck in anxiety, overwhelm, doubts, worries, frustrations, indecision, and even anger. And often this is because of a spiritual injury that we've experienced, some kind of hidden trauma. So it isn't the pain of the situation, it's the pain of not being connected into the natural energy of who we really are, of being connected to that magical part of us that's a creative vibrational being who can use positive energies to create what we want and bring it into physical manifestation. We can allow our manifestations to materialize and not get stuck in the negative vibrations that block them. These positive energies that we talk about so much are where we find the magic of alchemy because our choice of frequency, our choice of those positive thoughts and emotions can change the course of our journey. So today's question is, what is integrity and how can we use it to bring about transformation? I often ask this question in my workshops, and I've heard every imaginable answer. We'll usually get out our smartphones and start comparing definitions. And one thing has become abundantly clear: integrity is a very personal thing. For instance, one person might say, stealing is never acceptable. And sure enough, someone else will raise her hand and say, well, I shoplifted when I was a young mother because I needed to feed my children. So, which one is correct? Integrity is a very personal thing. I think the most definitions we've ever found in one sitting was 17 different definitions for integrity. So it's a good exercise to study this word and determine what it means for you. Now, I have a couple of favorite definitions for integrity, and you can see whether any of these are a good fit for you, just as a starting point, and also look for the ambiguities in these and where they're too general, because this is where you'll see that integrity can be a very personal thing. And so, probably the most common answers I get are these. Let me put them up on the slide for you. One, being honest, even if there will be negative consequences. Another definition of integrity, not causing harm to another person, or doing what's right, or doing what's right for me. Another definition, keeping my word, which is doing what I say I'll do. Another definition, treating others with respect and courtesy, and maybe expecting the same thing back. Another definition for integrity, being a positive influence for others, or maybe courageously taking a stand for what I believe in. Another definition for integrity, not hiding, but instead connecting with others on a deep level, or leaving a place better than I found it, or leaving a job or a relationship better than I found it. And maybe being true to myself and doing nothing that would demean or dishonor me, being true to myself. So, what does integrity mean to you? Because some of the common answers or popular answers that we see may not work for you. There may be ambiguities, maybe there are exceptions, or maybe someone else's definition is too general. So, what does integrity mean for you? All right. When we look in the dictionary, we might find things like having strong moral principles, following moral or ethical convictions, and doing the right thing in all circumstances, even when no one's watching. Maybe the state of being whole and undivided would be a good definition of integrity. A consistency of actions, values, principles, expectations, outcomes. As you can see, integrity has a lot of definitions and it can be a very personal thing. And it has everything to do with whether you'll reach the kind of success you desire. Okay, so I'm often asked this question. So here are my personal favorite definitions. Let me put these up on the screen for you. My first favorite definition is that I hold reverence for who you are and where you are on your journey. And my own personal other favorite definition is that I understand that I am a vibrational being able to effect transformation through positive energies. I hold this as a point of integrity and I hold it very high. So these are my personal favorites. But what we're aiming for here is to help you develop your definition of integrity, because how you define integrity becomes a guiding light for how you'll make decisions and for how you show up in the world. So if you ever find yourself in a moral dilemma, you'll have an easier time figuring out what to do. All right. Now, there's another side of integrity that comes up fairly often, and that is that there sometimes can be a split between two parts of you, sort of an energetic duality. Part of you wants this, and part of you wants that. There's the physical world side of you that has one opinion about integrity, and perhaps the spiritual side of you that might have a different opinion. So the question becomes, is there a difference between physical world integrity and spiritual integrity? So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a business partner or even a love partner, and this person does something that you consider to be heinous, just unforgivable. Yet another part of you tries to find a way to forgive them. And so this sort of becomes a moral battle or an energetic duality. You try to resolve the situation in your head and your heart. You look at the positives and the negatives. You weigh out the pros and cons. You look at it from every angle imaginable, and you feel like you need to make a decision about whether to keep this person in your life and whether you can build anything from where you are. But you just can't seem to reconcile it. And it feels like a battle between your physical self, who has boundaries and policies about life and business, and a very clear sense of integrity, and your spiritual self, who sees a bigger picture and recognizes there may be unseen forces at work here, or what we may call growth opportunities. Growth opportunities may be on your side and their side. So there may be growth opportunities on both sides. Well, we're really talking about your ego self versus your spiritual self. It's an energetic duality, a split energy. Your spiritual self wants to grow and expand and hold reverence for the other person, to honor who they are and where they are on their journey. Your spiritual self wants to be accepting and non judgmental. Your spiritual self recognizes that we don't make mistakes that need punishment necessarily, but with a little space, the other person will learn from their mistake and not cause harm again. Well, that's the spiritual perspective that we sometimes crave. But your ego self just keeps arguing inside your head, telling you everything that's wrong. And our ego argues for exceptions to our moral code. Our ego argues for exceptions to our moral code because our ego loves the drama. It keeps us from being spiritually centered. So, has this ever happened to you where there's an energetic duality, kind of a split energy? If you've ever been in a situation like this, sometimes it isn't so black and white. Sometimes there are unseen forces at work. For instance, what if we have a sacred contract with the other person to help them through a situation in this lifetime where they can learn how to be a better person? And with that in mind, would we have a new definition for integrity? In other words, do we want to upgrade our definition of integrity, something that will help us expand our own spiritual perspective? Interesting question, right? Now, you may remember the story of the woman who is a victim of domestic violence. I've told you guys this story before. She was a victim of domestic violence. She was battered beyond recognition and ultimately decided to get a divorce. And her best friend asked her, "What did you learn from your situation? What did you learn?" And the woman said that she learned forgiveness. And in the moment that she spoke that, she had a flash. It was almost like a memory where she and her ex husband were up in heaven. They were getting ready to come into this lifetime. And she told him, "I want to learn forgiveness in this next lifetime that we're about to incarnate into." And he volunteered to help her with that. And he hugged her and he whispered, "Just always know that no matter what, I love you. And I will do my very best to help you learn forgiveness." And here she was in this present life situation where she was a victim of domestic violence, remembering the conversation before they ever came into this lifetime. And that was huge because she had been blaming him, and suddenly she had a new spiritual perspective. Suddenly she realized that he wasn't to blame at all. They had an agreement together so that she could progress in her own spiritual growth. All right. So we find ourselves in these situations where we're being abused or somehow wronged. And here comes ego, that insidious, judgmental voice, and it will literally start screaming at us about the injustice. And this really gets in the way of our spiritual growth and our desire to expand our spiritual perspective because where's the integrity? Do we look to our physical world integrity, to our limited thinking, to our boundaries and policies about life and business? Or do we look to our spiritual integrity, that part of us that knows there might be a bigger picture and recognizes there may be unseen forces at work here where there's a growth opportunity on one or both sides? We can find ourselves in a moral dilemma, wondering whether to honor our physical world integrity or our spiritual integrity, where transformation may be happening just below the surface. When ego starts screaming at us about these injustices that we're experiencing, it's often just to protect us from our deepest and darkest fears. Ego can be very tricky and manipulative, though. And when this happens, people often tell me that they feel like they've entered a fog, not sure what to do. Do they listen to the voice that's trying to protect them or step into the space of allowing a transformation? Let me say that again. Do we listen to the voice that's trying to protect us or do we step into the space of allowing a transformation? Hmm. Have I struck an uncomfortable nerve? Like I say, integrity is a very personal subject. It isn't always so black and white, because sometimes there's an energetic duality, a split energy. This may feel like ambiguity or confusion or vacillation, and sometimes it's an energetic duality, a split energy between our physical self and our spiritual self. If you're the kind of person who sees a difference between physical world integrity and spiritual integrity, and you feel a longing to expand your spiritual integrity, well, this conversation might be shedding some light. I just invite you to keep an open mind, not be offended, and see if something in this rings true for you. Okay, what we're aiming for here is that your definition of integrity becomes a guiding light for how you'll make decisions and for how you'll show up in the world, so that if you ever find yourself in a moral dilemma, you'll have an easier time figuring out what to do. So, when we're in a place of blame and anger and frustration, when ego and its judgmental ways really has a hold of us, even though we may feel justified in our negative emotions, it just isn't a property energy foundation. And our spiritual self won't tolerate or support it. And this is where we may feel like we're being pulled in two different directions because there's an intolerance as we're taking a journey through personal development and spiritual growth. Let me say that another way. When we're experiencing negativity like blame and anger and frustration, it just isn't a property energy foundation. And our spiritual self won't tolerate or support it. There's an intolerance, and that can get in the way of our success. Let's look at an example. Let's say, for instance, that you've just started with a new vendor, and shortly into the relationship, they completely screw up something with your very best client, and you are humiliated, enraged, incensed. There's a choice to go into blame and anger and frustration, and you may feel justified, but that isn't a proper energy foundation. And your spiritual self won't tolerate or support it. This is what I mean when I say that you may feel like you're being pulled in two different directions. Part of you has very strong boundaries and rules and expectations of everyone you work with. And part of you recognizes that being in blame and anger and frustration isn't a proper energy foundation. What I mean by this is these negative emotions aren't a proper foundation and won't help you grow and evolve. In fact, and you can write this down, it's nearly impossible to create success on top of negative emotions. It's nearly impossible to create success on top of negative emotions. Remember, if we're going to effect transformation, if we're going to transform challenges into successes, we do that through positive energies like compassion and understanding and wisdom. We effect transformation through trust and acceptance for the process that's unfolding before us. We surrender to the grace of the situation while we hold the space for a better than expected outcome. This is our hidden power. Okay. So, the negative emotions of ego are the antithesis to spiritual integrity and won't allow for personal growth. Ego dramatizes like a snotty little brat. In order to be congruent with the core essence of who we are, in order to be congruent with the essence of who we are as vibrational beings, in order to be congruent with our sense of integrity, we have to shed these negative defense mechanisms. So this doesn't mean that we're giving in or giving a pass to the person who screwed up our client relationship. It just means that we are creating a proper energy foundation by choosing positive thought patterns and positive energies. And this is so that we can find a better than expected outcome. And in doing so, we'll be tapping into an amazing hidden power. In doing so, we'll be tapping into the audacity of alchemy and transforming this challenging situation into a brilliant success. So let's manage our energy. Let's ascend to a new level. Let's approach our challenges with spiritual integrity. And that means understanding that we are vibrational beings, all of us are. And our true purpose in life is to effect transformation through positive energies. Now, this may require a bit of practice and discipline. I'll give you that. Energetic mastery is having the audacity to be rid of this dramatic repertoire that comes from our ego thinking. So, when we find ourselves bouncing around in a moral dilemma, when we find ourselves bouncing between the drama of ego and back to spiritual integrity and back into the justifications of our negative response and back over to spiritual integrity, this split energy is actually our spiritual self trying to get us to align with this idea of alchemy and transformation. It's our spiritual self trying to realign and recenter and recalibrate us into the positive energies where we can truly effect transformation. When we find ourselves feeling this confusion or this vacillation between these two parts of ourselves, between our physical world integrity that has rules and boundaries and our spiritual integrity that sees a bigger picture and where we can influence the outcome, and when the inner dialogue spins around in our head and the mind chatter just chitter chatters along, well, you know what? It may not be confusion at all. Consider that it's the ego's fight for its life as our higher self tries to install a proper energetic foundation. It may not be confusion at all. It may be that our higher self is trying to install a proper energetic foundation. And that's a normal part of this process, especially if we're going through an ascension as we flex our new spiritually integrity based muscles, if I can say it that way. During challenges, which are really just opportunities for spiritual growth, we're being rid of layers of ego's drama and defensive programming. And this is what the confusion or vacillation is all about. We're doing a deep cleaning. Not only are we healing our personal lives, but in the process, we're also healing the larger macrocosm. We may not realize it, but we're influencing and inspiring others around us to be their best selves too. This deep cleaning can be painful as it requires us to give it all up, nothing held back, fully exposed and vulnerable. Nothing is veiled from our ability to see or live by spiritual integrity as we've defined it and as we know to be true. Because, sorry to say, but once we commit to living a life of integrity, these challenges will come up to test our level of commitment to this new level of integrity. As these challenges come up, we're being asked to drop all resistance and negativity and defense mechanisms and let the circumstance self correct as we stand by and witness the old patterns being shifted and completely dissolved. Yes, this is the other side of defining what integrity means for us. It invites in the unseen forces to shift our patterns and completely dissolve them. And we need to be prepared for this because it may blindside us. And these unseen forces may be doing a deep cleaning for the other person too. And that's why it's best to drop all resistance and negativity and defense mechanisms. You know, I remember going through this some years ago, and I still remember the day. It was March 17th. I don't know why I remember that date. And during a difficult challenge, I had a moment of clarity, a brief moment of clarity for how I could restore my own integrity and effect transformation. And it was a new vision for how I wanted things to be. And it was brilliant clarity. And I felt a strength surge in me that I'd never quite felt before. And I still remember that I wrote out a short commitment, just a little sentence. And then I said it out loud as an affirmation over the next few days. And barely a week later, the entire client relationship completely fell apart, and I was devastated. I struggled for months as I was in a complete panic that it didn't go at all like I'd envisioned. Not at all my emotions surfaced, and I felt like I was living inside a pinball machine with my head in there with the little silver balls just beating me up. And this internal battle started up between my ego self and my spiritual self. And my ego self was full of anger and justifications, followed by reasoning and grief. And I was an emotional mess. It was insidious because I had become completely clear about my own integrity and this new vision. How in the world could I be having such torment and torture inside my head and my heart? But as it smoothed out, as it self corrected, and I was able to rise to new levels of integrity, I could see that I was actually getting exactly what I'd asked for. And I didn't need to go through all that inner torment. After all, I just got a little blindsided, that's all, thinking that my entire world was falling apart when actually it was coming together. I had completely forgotten that it was exactly what I'd asked for. And then life began to unfold as I'd envisioned it. It wasn't easy because I didn't understand at the time what was happening energetically. I just had to stand by and witness as universal forces began dissolving the membranes that created energetic duality inside me. where part of me was so angry, yet part of me wanted to experience spiritual and personal growth so that I could be more whole within and therefore be more whole in my interaction with others. Gotta tell you, it was intense. So, as you refine your integrity, just be prepared that universal forces will step up. They will begin dissolving those membranes that energetically create duality inside you, where part of you thinks this way and part of you thinks that way. I'll give you an example. Have you ever used a sewing machine? And you know how they say to complete your stitch and then run the sewing machine in reverse for a few stitches and then run it forward again and then reverse again. And that way the stitches won't come loose and the garment won't unravel. Well, imagine that through behavioral patterns and life experiences throughout our lifetime and past lives as well, these negative energies and responses and beliefs have been stitched to our soul. And now those little threads have to be cut free. And we have hundreds or thousands of seams holding together our soul. So there's a lot of unthreading that has to happen, right? When we decide to live with a new integrity and not the kind of integrity where we say we're a spiritual person and then go down to the grocery store and cuss out the cashier or bully the person in the parking lot who doesn't know how to park. When we decide to up level our life with a stronger sense of new integrity, universal forces will sometimes have to dissolve those stitches inside and create that have previously created duality so that we can become whole again. Where we're living as two different people, at times our ego self and other times our spiritual self, we're trying to undo all that so that we can become whole again. So we need to take the necessary time out to be gentle and forgiving as we practice energetic mastery by holding the space of sometimes intense but always powerful spiritual and personal growth. Gotta tell you, it's alchemy at its best. Now, I have an exercise for you. First, I'd like you to write down your definition of integrity. I'll put these steps up on the screen here for you. Number one, write down your definition of integrity. Number two, I'd like you to Google integrity and browse through some definitions, looking for what resonates with you. And then next, I would like you to decide for yourself whether you think there's a difference between physical world integrity and spiritual integrity. Just kind of try that on and see how that fits for you. And then finally, if you agree with the concept of spiritual integrity, then take a moment to update what integrity means for you. What we're aiming for here is that your definition of integrity becomes a guiding light for how you'll make decisions and how you'll show up in the world and how you'd like life to unfold, so that if you ever find yourself in a moral dilemma, you'll have an easier time figuring out what to do with your newfound proper energy foundation, because our energy means everything to our success. All right. As we empower ourselves towards self expression and who we are at our core without the negative thoughts and emotions that can drain us, we're choosing a higher frequency, higher and better thoughts, a higher level of integrity, because our choice of frequency, our choice of more positive emotions, changes the course of our journey. So, reflecting back on everything we covered today, how can you apply what you've learned? Do you feel like you'll now be able to find the wisdom to know what path to take whenever you're faced with a dilemma? All right. Hope this helps you as you're using the powers of alchemy to transform challenges and obstacles into positive new successes. This podcast is all about helping you have success on your spiritual growth journey. It's all about getting unstuck by unlocking your hidden power. If you still can't get your head around what's got you stuck in life or in business, you can tell me about it. You can send me a question to questions at unlockyourhiddenpower.com, or you may not know that you can schedule a one on one session with your own personal unstuckologist, that's me, by visiting instantbreakthroughsession.com. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I'm wishing you a life filled with all the alchemy you need to bring success to you. Feel free to share this video with anyone you know who's feeling stuck, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.